River about 8 miles south of Picayune, and it is only moving at about 10 miles an hour. So you see the highlighted area here. Let's go and start kind of analyzing this, and I might have to turn off the lightning because it almost gets too distracting with the rest of the data that we're trying to look at. So we're going to go to our velocities where we look at that possible spin in the storm, and it's kind of going back in time here an hour or so, just kind of watching where this storm is originating. Certainly some very strong winds with it, and looking to see if I can really find that maybe more clear-cut picture. It looks like right about in through here, so I know it doesn't just jump out at you sometimes, but it's going to be right in through here, so almost right at the state line. So while it does include St. Tammany Parish, it really is not going to be in the parish or in the state for much longer as it will continue. So this is looking to be just to the east of I-59 at the moment, so probably have developed just to the east of the interstate and continuing to move toward the state line. So it should be there fairly shortly, moving at about 10 miles an hour. So this is not a rapidly moving storm by any means, but as we kind of look at the velocities just to try and find that little signature, and actually I'm going to go to our shear marker, which actually indicates possible rotation. Yeah, nothing just jumping out at us. If there is in fact a tornado on the ground, for one thing, it looks like it may be more in the kind of Pearl River Basin itself, so just to the south of some of these communities where hopefully at the moment really not impacting anyone. So at the moment it looks like it's probably just more over the kind of little marshier areas right near the river basin. So you know, here's the Pearl, and this is very much more the basin itself. So not really affecting too many folks at the moment, but it does look like if it does continue, we will be crossing into then Mississippi and Hancock County and continuing over a few of the little communities here near Gainesville, Napoleon, and Stennis, not the Stennis Space Center, that's a little bit closer to the coast, but Stennis, that's being marked off on our map here. So let me go back to the reflectivity, and again, when you look at the lightning, that is what has been more impressive than anything. The lightning within these storms has just been incredible. When you look at the sheer amount of lightning. Let's also take a look at some of the potential hail within this. Doesn't look like that's much of an issue. Again, the velocities, while not jumping out at me at the moment, again, it looks like maybe some shear markers is what prompted the National Weather Service to go ahead and issue that that tornado warning. Tornadic storm, as I said, will remain thankfully over more rural areas in eastern St. Tammany and then continuing into western central Hancock County. This would, as it continues in that direction at about mile marker 3 on I-10, once it does cross into Mississippi. So, as I said, the velocities themselves not jumping out at me that looks clear cut. I'm going to kind of loop this over the last 30 minutes just to see if there's anything that kind of jumps out. Certainly, as I said, some very strong winds within that. You kind of see almost the fluctuation of the reds and greens back and forth there, right at, and I'm talking about kind of right in the northern end of our box here, where you kind of see the reds and greens fluctuating back and forth. So it does look like that is where the rotation is of the storm itself and where there is at the moment the potential of a tornado. As I said, this is not a confirmed tornado. This is radar indicated, so the radar has tools that allow it to find that wind shear and rotation within a storm, and that is what has jumped out to the folks at the National Weather Service office to go ahead and issue the tornado warning. I'm going to put this back into motion, and I'm going to actually step off camera here so I can jump over to our chat group with the National Hurricane Center just to see exactly what they are thinking within this storm. So as I said, what doesn't necessarily jump out looking at the velocities could very well be a very weak tornado on the ground, and the indications are from the National Weather Service and their tools that are accessible to them, that is what they are seeing in terms of a rotation enough down to the lower levels of the, let's see, okay, the tornado warning, just kind of reading the text from the National Weather Service office that they're saying if it does touch down, would likely be short-lived. It is intersecting an outflow boundary. That's what it's allowing it to kind of kick up really very quickly. And one of the firefighters with the Slidell, one of the Slidell departments there, one of the fire departments there, is saying that he is looking at it just east of Pearl River. He's saying what he sees is a funnel cloud. He's not able to tell if it was on the ground or not. So we kind of have almost a ground confirmation of a potential tornado, yet to be determined whether or not what he was seeing actually touched down. And then in his last post to the National Weather Service office chat group, he's saying it appears to have lifted back into the storm. So the good news is, at least with the fire department, and this is from one of their firefighters who actually is a fairly good weather observer for us, Mitchell Geisler, out at the Slidell office there. He is saying what he was looking at was possibly a funnel cloud. He was not able to confirm as to whether or not it was actually on the ground, but what he saw was certainly a funnel cloud, and does appear as though it has lifted back into the storm. So that may be some good news. Not going to pull the trigger on this being expired just yet, but certainly some good news with regards to actually having some ground truth and observation from that storm itself. So again, just kind of watching the chat group here as I kind of get the discussion in from the National Weather Service office. You kind of like to see what they are thinking in real time. So he was saying it was just to the east of Pearl River. He was able to see a funnel cloud, could not actually see if it had touched the ground or not, but from his vantage point in near Pearl River is that it lifted back into the storm. And as the National Weather Service office said, this would probably kind of move my computer here a little bit. They said that this was probably not going to last for very long. It was more associated with an outflow boundary. In other words, you get these little outflow boundaries that kind of move in all different directions, and sometimes as they collide, you will get that interaction and kind of a brief spin up and maybe enough of a low level spin to allow for a tornado to form. Usually with these little outflow boundary induced tornadoes, they don't last for very long. They tend to be a little bit weaker. And hopefully what it was just a funnel cloud that formed, never touched down to the ground, and thus was not going to be any kind of an issue down at the surface. As we've also said, that this is in a more rural area where you're just east of the Pearl River itself. So it really is not affecting anyone. So it's actually interesting that we were able to get some observation on that. Usually within these potential tornadoes in very rural areas, you get absolutely no no ground truth, no real confirmation on it. As we said, the velocity's not looking at very much, not as very impressive in what we, more than honest, typically see here. Again, there is a little shear marker. Actually, there is no longer any shear marker in the warned area. We will see if the National Weather Service office will allow this to continue all the way up to 9:30. As I said, this warning is in effect until 9:30. And obviously, this is still something we need to take very, very seriously. I'm trying to find exactly where that rotation may be. It's just not jumping out at me. When we look at some of the various tools that we have access to. I'm going to look at one other thing. I know it's going to be kind of complicated looking. This actually looks at possible debris. Obviously, in these very rural areas, you're not actually going to get any kind of debris signature. And sometimes you might find something that kind of jumps out to you, but doesn't appear as though that there really was. Looking back at the velocities, what may have been a little bit more impressive at one time in the warned area, not quite there any longer. And switch over to the storm relative. And yeah, just not looking very impressive. But obviously, I don't want to downplay the folks within the warned area. So as I kind of zoom in here again on our polygon, just the communities, the kind of Highway 607, once you're into Mississippi, what is labeled as Gainesville and Stennis, right near Highway 607 in Mississippi, north of 10. Again, if this were to continue and make it all the way to I-10, it's at around mile marker 3 past the state line. So just to give you a rough idea of where that is. So again, we're going to focus on this tornado warning as well as just the sheer amount of lightning within these very strong thunderstorms that have been developing. And then there was a new, you just see to the north of that includes Picayune and parts of St. Tammany, a new severe thunderstorm warning, gusty winds, strong winds, the main threat from that one. But the sheer amount of lightning within these storms. And a lot of folks may have seen our push alert a little bit ago this evening, is that now a good portion of our area is under a severe thunderstorm watch until 1 a.m. We've been watching these storms as they really got started over southern Alabama earlier in the day, and a lot of the models had been indicating we would start to see more building to the west. What's been interesting is that the model trend had been fairly consistent in building this almost more horizontal and building it out toward Baton Rouge, and that really is not what has happened. It's kind of developed more longitudinally, almost north to south, almost more northwest to southeast, and this is slowly moving toward more southeast Louisiana. So we are getting additional thunderstorm development and kind of riding along almost a boundary here from southwest Mississippi through Bogalusa, some very heavy thunderstorms in parts of Washington Parish, continuing down into parts of St. Tammany, includes Picayune, and then down. Boy, the lightning, though, south of Cat Island, the eastern Biloxi Marsh toward the Chandeleurs. Again, if you're in the city or really anywhere and looking out to the east, the lightning has just been nonstop. In fact, I turned our tower camera out in that direction just to see what the lightning was like. So we're looking back down Rampart towards St. Roch and St. Bernard Parish, and the lightning, I'm going to move my computer here just out of the shot, has been just almost non-stop. The lightning within these thunderstorms is absolutely incredible. Lightning is not one of the criteria for a severe thunderstorm warning. Surprisingly enough, it is not. It's the wind and the hail, also the potential of a tornado. But the lightning, nevertheless, has been very intense within these storms. Thankfully, the bulk of that, so far as it has been moving into the WWL viewing area, have been more so offshore. That was not the case over the last several days with the amount of lightning that we've seen some of the storms that have been along the Alabama and Florida beaches over the last couple of days. So to update folks as to what we are watching right now, there is a tornado warning that is in effect for St. Tammany and Hancock County. I'm going to zoom into that highlighted area as we kind of watch what has been, if there's any rotation within the storm, it's fairly slow moving at about 10 miles an hour. Reports are that, and again, these are not confirmed reports, but from a fairly trustworthy weather observer, that it looked like at about, say, 8:43, so about 10 minutes ago, he could confirm what looked to be a funnel cloud just to the east of Pearl River. He was not able to tell if the storm or the tornado, the funnel cloud, was actually on the ground, so it may have just been a funnel cloud. And then about 5 minutes later, and this is from a observation, is that he said it seems to have lifted back into the storm. So I'm going to kind of keep our chat going here as well as I can, just to see what the thinking is from the National Weather Service office as we continue with this warning, just to see if they are going to continue this over the course of the next, this is until 9:30, so for the next 35 minutes or so, or if they are going to allow it to expire if we're not actually seeing any more of that wind shear and the indications of the rotation. Again, when we look at the velocities, I think at this point a lot of folks, viewers at home, are probably attuned to exactly what we look for when we're looking at the velocities. The velocities is the Doppler part of radar, and it is actually looking at the winds. The radar site is in Slidell at the airport, and we are looking at the winds either coming toward the radar, which is the greens to blues, or moving away, which is the reds and yellows. So you can kind of see this is the motion toward the radar site and then the motion away. However, when you get those reds and greens fairly tightly wound together, meaning they're moving toward and away in a very small area, that is indicating rotation. Not necessarily a tornado, but it is indicating rotation within the thunderstorm. And then there are several algorithms that the radar uses to indicate if there is maybe some low-level rotation, wind shear within the storm, and that may be indicating a tornado trying to form. When all of that happens, it sends a trigger to the National Weather Service Office meteorologists. They'll take a look at it, and then they will decide whether or not they're going to issue a warning. They saw enough to warrant the issuance of a warning just a little while ago. And again, just kind of looking back at the velocities here, you know, it does not just jump out at you now at around 8:34, and this is what's interesting. This is probably the best look. We call this a couplet when you have the motion away and toward the radar. When you have that little couplet, this was probably the best it has looked. And this would about coincide with what our weather observers were saying. I could see a funnel cloud just to the east of Pearl River. That looked to be about when we saw that. That was at about 8:34. Then as we put that into motion, about 10 minutes or so later, he said it looked like it may have lifted back into the storm. You really don't see that couplet any longer, and you don't see it. This is the latest image from the radar. You really don't see that any longer. There may be a little bit of slight wind shear, a little bit of rotation right there near I-10. That would be just the extreme southern eastern end of the watch box, or of the warning box that is in place at the moment. So that may be right over I-10. Regardless, that's going to have some very strong winds with it, whether or not there is a tornado. And again, regardless of whether or not there was indeed a tornado on the ground, you are going to find some very strong straight line winds within these thunderstorms that will continue possibly into the early overnight hours. We are under a severe thunderstorm watch for much of the area until 1 a.m. The watch was issued as what we're expecting to see through the night, the potential for more of these storms to continue building toward the east into the late night hours and then early morning hours. So we're going to be closely watching these individual cells as we go throughout the rest of the night. In the area that is highlighted in yellow, that is a severe thunderstorm watch. At times, though not very common, you can get a little quick spin up, and it tends to be, as we said, or as I said earlier, from these little outflow boundaries. As they kind of collide, you can get a little bit of rotation, and that will warrant a tornado warning if we start to see some rotation with those colliding outflow boundaries. And trying to forecast exactly where those little boundaries are going to interact with each other is near impossible. It really is impossible to figure that out. Just looking at the last hour worth of radar data, you'll notice what appears to be almost a very slow motion of this entire boundary of storms moving toward the southwest. So if this were to continue, and it doesn't look like it's going to let up, we may be getting into some of this heavier rainfall and very frequent lightning, perhaps within the next couple of hours, even in metro New Orleans. You'll notice that we're starting to get more of those storms pushing westward into Washington Parish, starting to see some outflow boundaries in St. Tammany Parish. We could see some initialization of some storms along that outflow boundary. And you also kind of slowly watch these storms move away from Harrison County into more Hancock County, moving more and more into the Biloxi Marsh. So if this were to continue, this may be something that we're dealing with into the late night hours, and the lightning is going to be probably the most impressive of everything. Certainly some strong winds with these, but as far as the look goes, for folks at home kind of wading through this, it is going to be the lightning. So we're starting to get into those heavier thunderstorms now across more of St. Tammany, especially eastern St. Tammany, starting to get into the heavy rainfall. Not quite to Slidell just yet, but it is moving in your direction. And certainly, as we've also noted, you can get lightning strikes well away, well removed from the actual thunderstorms. In fact, look at this. There are lightning strikes being detected out over the western part of Lake Pontchartrain, and here are the thunderstorms not even to the eastern part of the lake. That's what out of the blue, that's the kind of lightning we talk about. It can be miles removed from the actual thunderstorms themselves. So completely dry, obviously, over the western part of the lake this evening, but lightning is striking there. And it wouldn't be hard to get some lightning strikes here in the city, even though the thunderstorms themselves are well removed from metro New Orleans right now. But you'll also notice a little outflow boundary kind of passing along New Orleans east. We could see some further development of thunderstorms from this little outflow as it is getting ready to pass over the city. So shortly we're going to get this little kind of brief gust of wind from the outflow boundary of these thunderstorms, which are inching closer to more of metro New Orleans and more of southeast Louisiana. The Weather Service will continue the tornado warning as I'm looking at the chat group with the National Weather Service office folks, just to see if they're doing anything about the warning right now, the tornado warning. As I said, this was issued at 8:38. This was going to go until 9:30. I was struggling to really find much in the way of any rotation or shear that was even still being detected by the velocities on radar. So I'm waiting to see if perhaps they're still seeing it, or if maybe they will cancel this warning ahead of time. Otherwise, it's going to still be in place for the next almost 30 minutes or so. So we'll be watching this one closely. And again, regardless if there is a tornado, you've got some very strong winds within these thunderstorms, and the lightning has just been absolutely incredible. Strong winds actually may be picking up a little bit outside of this box when you start to see these brighter colors toward the radar site itself. When you start to see these brighter colors, that is indicating stronger winds. We can get a rough idea of what those wind speeds are. You're looking at sustained winds of near 60 miles an hour. And this is fairly accurate because as you get closer and closer to the radar site, these wind speeds are actually closer and closer to the surface. When the radar beam goes out, it's actually elevated because of the curvature of the Earth. So the farther out you go away from the radar, when you start taking these samples, you're actually sampling higher and higher parts of the atmosphere. When you're sampling the storm near the radar site, you're much, much closer to the surface. You're getting a far more accurate reading. And so with wind estimates of 50, 60 miles an hour near the radar site in Slidell, it's almost certain that you're getting some sustained winds of 60 miles an hour, kind of straight line winds within these thunderstorms. So as I said, even if you're outside of the tornado warned area at the moment, you're getting in on some very intense rainfall, very frequent lightning, and also some very strong winds. If you're just joining us, I was showing an image here of our tower camera up on top of our building here in the French Quarter, and I turned it back toward the east, so we're looking down Rampart towards St. Roch and St. Bernard Parish, and the lightning has just been almost non-stop. You will get the flashes of lightning which continue, and this does look like it is inching a little bit closer to the metro area, and will likely continue on into the late night hours and early morning hours. I will say the computer models did do a great job, and sometimes these little convective areas, these more complex areas of thunderstorms, are not well forecasted by our by our even high resolution models. Sometimes these type of structures are just very, very difficult for the models to analyze because they're a smaller system, and they tend to have their own dynamics and physics with it. Just a complicated way of saying the computer models usually struggle with these type of systems. So where the models had been, if you were with us at 5 and 6, they were indicating more of a horizontal type structure developing over parts of New Orleans, the North Shore, and out toward Baton Rouge, and it really developed as more of a northwest to southeast structure. So while the structure may not be quite there, it at least was indicating that these storms were not going to just wrap up over Mississippi, which we were hoping maybe they would, that these would likely continue and start pushing more to the west. Now those models also had a lot of these storms kind of winding down after about 11 o'clock or so. Doesn't look like that is going to be the case now. We'll say these storms are not nearly as intense as they had been over parts of southern Alabama, especially lower Mobile County, and as they were moving toward Moss Point, again, same structure, same complex of storms that did develop that tornado in Moss Point, but these have not been nearly as strong. And again, as far as the real tornado threat, the one that we've been watching under the warning is not really no longer jumping out as anything that is probably on the ground. Let me switch back over to our velocities. We'll kind of zoom in here. Again, what had looked a little bit more impressive earlier, we did have some observations of certainly a water spout, whether or not there was actually a tornado on the ground, but there were reports, water spout, a funnel cloud within that storm. Was not able to confirm as to whether or not that was on the ground, but what you kind of see, watch what the winds do, where they just kind of pulsate away from the center here as these storms just keep building and sending winds kind of away from where some of these individual little complexes of thunderstorms develop. I mean, regardless of a tornado at this point, you've got some very strong winds, intense rainfall, very frequent lightning. This is something, if you were planning to hit the I-12, I-10 corridor, that you're not going to want to drive out in this. This is some pretty rough weather moving through. Only in isolated locations have we seen wind speeds or the possibility of hail that would support severe thunderstorm warnings. So far, the only warning that we have, aside from the tornado warning, is a severe thunderstorm warning, which does include Picayune, eastern St. Bernards, or excuse me, eastern St. Tammany, well to the east of Abita Springs, but certainly some very heavy rainfall, frequent lightning, and the reason for the warning, some strong gusty winds, which would be supportive of a severe thunderstorm. As of right now, we are still dry here in the city, waiting to see, and I apologize for walking off camera here. I'm going over to our computer with the chat group, going with the National Weather Service office just to see if they will continue. As a matter of fact, I might just ask them to see if they are going to continue the tornado warning, because as we've mentioned those folks, we do work hand in hand with the Weather Service office meteorologists, and as we've mentioned to them before, sometimes they will issue these warnings and they have been focused on other things and they kind of forget that that warning is still in place. And we mentioned to them, well, hey, look, for on-air purposes, when you guys issue a warning, we're going to stay on until that warning has been lifted. So just a reminder that we're still on the air, whether or not the warning is still needed or not. So just kind of put in a little reminder about, hey, you still got that warning out. Is that still a thing? Because as of right now, looking at the velocities, I'm not really seeing anything that is jumping out. Looking at the wind shear markers, you know, you've got some little spotty areas. This is basically looking at kind of a composite where there may be some slight wind shear, very, very weak indications of maybe some wind shear within that. But we've also seen some areas of wind shear outside of the warned area. And we can also go to a shear tracker to see if there's any kind of a trend of this. It's just kind of all over the place. So nothing really jumping out with regards to a tornado warning in this box. However, I always err on the side of caution if you are in these areas kind of along Highway 607 in Mississippi. Again, kind of projecting that out around mile marker 3 on I-10 in Hancock County. This is the area that we are looking at right now for a potential tornado. Now, the tornado warning, as I said, does go until 9:30. They're mentioning the strong thunderstorms that are still impacting all of these areas until 9:30 as well. They're getting some reports of quarter-size hail near Picayune. So some reports from the public of a little bit of hail within these storms, as well as the strong gusty winds that are showing up within the storms as well. As I said, we had almost now approaching a half hour ago, would look to be maybe a funnel cloud observed by a fire official, Mitchell Geisler, who's one of our more reliable weather observers. I've been chatting with him for years now, and he's one of our more reliable weather observers. So he said he had spotted would look to be a funnel cloud, was not able to see if it was on the ground or not. That was at about 8:43, and at about 8:47, he says it appears to have lifted back into the storm. And even when the warning came out from the National Weather Service office, they said that this would likely, if it were to touch down, would likely be brief, as if this were to touch down, it would likely be brief. And I apologize, I'm getting more chats in here with the group, but just saying that it would likely be a brief tornado if it were to in fact touch down. These little outflow collisions sometimes will quickly spin up a little weak tornado if possible. They are issuing now a flash flood warning for St. Tammany, Hancock, and Pearl River. This will be until 1:15. So I think more of an immediate threat than the potential of this tornado, which, again, if we were to have had one, would probably have been about a half hour ago at this point. And so I would venture to say if there had been one that briefly spun up, it is probably gone now, as we're not getting the kind of interaction with the outflow boundary from what we had a little bit earlier ago. So I think more of an immediate concern now is going to be the potential for some flooding. We can kind of get a look at some of the rough estimates of some of the rainfall totals here in these areas. If my computer will update some of the rainfall totals. Let me see if it'll. Here we go. Some of the rough estimates of rainfall totals here. Well, these are the rainfall rates of what we're getting within some of these storms. Have been in excess of, if my totals will come up for me, which they're not. My computer's being stubborn on me. Again, we're probably getting a couple of inches in a short period of time. Again, these are very heavy downpours and the possibility of leading to some flooding. So you can kind of see just behind some of the, maybe I'll remove our radar data here just for a second. The area highlighted in green is a flash flood warning, so that's for St. Tammany, kind of the Lacombe area, Slidell, north in the Hancock County, Picayune, and then south for the heavy rainfall that has already fallen there, and the additional rain as we kind of put this into motion. It's just not going anywhere, and that is the problem that we did see across parts of Florida, lower Alabama over the last couple of days, that these storms just kind of sit, and that may be a concern as we look ahead to the future. I'm not going to look at the computer models right now. We might check that in a second, but they have not really been doing a great job of really initializing these storms well, nor really a good grasp of how the structure of the storm has been laid out. But you'll notice that these storms continue to build up to the north, and this will likely continue or propagate the rainfall going there for much longer. And as I also said, you're also noticing that these storms continue to slide slowly toward the southwest. So eventually we will be, and you've already started to see, what had been dry out in, say, the Venetian Isles area, Eden Isles, and St. Tammany, not quite the Venetian Isles yet, more Lake St. Catherine, that is moving in the direction. So it will start moving further into Orleans Parish, and we will start to get more of these storms moving into then Metro New Orleans, probably within the next, say, hour and a half or so. They have been moving rather slowly. So the good news is that there is some time to still, you know, if you have to run a quick errand in the city, you've got a little bit of time. You know, we have not had any reports. I know our folks in the newsroom are checking with some of the local officials if we're starting to see any issues or any concern of maybe some flooding in the area where perhaps the neutral ground rules are being bent to get those cars a little bit higher. Again, just because it's going to be kind of an unknown as to how long some of this heavier rainfall will sit over the city, and we know it does not take much or for very long that rainfall to start leading to some flooding. Thankfully, if there is any consolation, is that they are moving. So while they do almost seem to be stationary, that was certainly the case earlier this afternoon as we were watching the storms in lower Alabama. They were stationary. Boy, they just didn't go anywhere. These at least have a little bit of motion to them. I keep referencing the computer model, and I hate to show it only because I want to see if it's even initializing. Well, it's a decent job. We've kind of had the structure of the storms now, so maybe the model is starting to pick up on what's actually happening. So let's kind of put this into motion and see what goes on through the evening. Now, the model itself would have these storms starting to weaken within the next, this is 10:45, and you're getting more breaks in it and some little clusters, pockets of storms. This would have me believe that the storms really start falling apart. If that is the case, that is great. Looks like by this scenario, by midnight, most of the storms are gone. And that may be the case. Again, the Weather Service the Storm Prediction Center only has the severe thunderstorm watch, meaning conditions are favorable for severe thunderstorms. The watch is only in effect until 1 o'clock, and our high resolution model would indicate that the storms should be gone. So hopefully that is the case. This will be something we watch over the course of the next hour or so, just to see what the storms do, and hopefully there is kind of a weakening trend of these storms. We have not yet seen that, so just consider what we do know in the near future as opposed to what we hope is going to happen within the next 3 hours or so. Hopefully that these storms do start to weaken, but at the moment they're still packing quite a punch. A lot of lightning, very heavy rainfall, and as far as I can see from the National Weather Service office, the tornado warning continues. I did ask the Weather Service office, they didn't respond to me. I was just asking if the tornado warning would continue. Again, that's almost at this point secondary, as it doesn't look like there's really anything there. If there had been, it looks like it was probably about just after 8:30 or so that we actually had something that was in that warn box that might have been indicative of a weak tornado possibly touching down. Otherwise, not really seeing that any longer. A lot of little features kind of popping up here on radar with these storms that continue to build, now almost building. As you watch in St. Tammany Parish, you kind of watch as the storms initialize, but kind of initiate along that little outflow boundary. As you had those heavier thunderstorms, you get those downburst winds, the colder winds that are up in the higher parts of the thunderstorm are forced down, and that cold air spreads very rapidly. When that happens, sometimes that will then lift the warmer air out ahead of it, and that will initiate more thunderstorms. And that's exactly what we saw. These little outflow boundaries kind of triggering more storms as they start pushing farther and farther to the west. So it may be that the cluster itself doesn't necessarily, or vaguely moves toward the west, but we start to see more of these storms kind of initializing or initiating farther west as these little outflow boundaries keep passing on through. We do have one out in the eastern part of the lake that is moving toward the city. So while we've been dry so far, we'll be watching this to see if maybe this little outflow boundary is able to initiate some thunderstorms in the metro area. If you're in parts of New Orleans east, you might have just noticed kind of a wind gust, maybe a cooler wind gust that just moved on through. That is the outflow from the thunderstorms that for the most part are still out over the Biloxi Marsh. They are pushing more so into now Lake Borgne, and will continue to do so as we head into the next couple of hours or so. Again, this is something that we'll be watching through the night, and hopefully our models can be trusted, and that these storms will start to weaken. Again, I don't want to say further weaken, because we're not really seeing that just yet, but hopefully that is an indication of what will start to happen. One thing that we can do, and I'm going to go to our latest image here, and then I'm going to do a lightning counter. So we're going to see just how much lightning we've actually seen in this area. So we're going to kind of query on the computer how many lightning strikes. So querying this area currently, we've had about 3,000 lightning strikes every few minutes. Now, going back in time just to see what the lightning was like in this same area, give it a second, it was at about 3,700. So it does look like in the last hour within this area that I've queried, the lightning number has decreased, which usually would indicate that the thunderstorms are weakening. Not rapidly so, but hey, we'll take that. And so it does look like maybe the storms are slowly starting to weaken as they continue toward the west. Now, that doesn't mean we won't see any additional severe thunderstorm warnings, but hopefully on the wide scale, kind of looking at the entire complex of storms, it is beginning to weaken a little bit. And certainly just based on the lightning counter, that number has dropped in the last hour. And hopefully that is a trend which continues going past the 10, 11, 12 o'clock hour. And again, if our high resolution model is to believe by about midnight, most of these thunderstorms should be gone. I'm going to jump back over to our tower camera looking at the storms to the east from down Rampart. And as the storms get closer, we should be seeing more and more lightning within these thunderstorms. So this is Rampart Street looking out towards St. Roch, then beyond St. Bernard. So this is where the thunderstorm activity is coming in from. You see some flashes here and there, but what, 10 minutes ago, 20 minutes ago, we were showing this camera and it was just nonstop. So maybe we're starting to see a little bit of a trend of weakening of the storms. That would be wonderful. And if that is the case, then in fact, our computer model was right. We can verify that the model was right if these storms do continue to weaken. However, with that said, for folks that are watching, a new tornado warning has just been issued for central St. Tammany Parish. So this is kind of a long, they've said that the new tornado warning that has just come out for St. Tammany includes, let's see, I'm going to read this, the text here. I apologize for being off the screen. This would include, this is just to the northwest of Slidell, so this is more centered over Abita Springs. Abita at around 9:55, and then Covington at around 10. The Weather Service is leaving the other tornado warning in place as to not confuse folks as if this was a continuation of an earlier warning. So this is a separate warning, and the verbiage from the Weather Service is probably indicating that the earlier tornado warning the threat is gone. So again, this is what we saw earlier. This is the interaction with other little outflow boundaries. They can quickly get a little spin up, and thus that may prompt a warning to be issued. Let's look at the velocities. Nothing jumping out at me as far as just a clear-cut signature of where there may be some wind shear. Let's look at the wind shear markers. Yeah, you know, they were talking about kind of the Abita, but maybe just to the east of Covington and right around Abita. So it might be right in through here where we're looking at the potential, well, at least where there is a little bit of wind shear showing up. And then when I switch over to the velocities, it doesn't jump out at you, but they're kind of highlighting a spot a little bit more north, not very well seen, and then another little area that may be showing some signs of circulation or some rotation there. So I'm going to switch over to the storm relative velocities just to get an idea. You know, they just don't jump out within these type of storms as they're rolling on through. They just don't jump out at you. So it really becomes a little bit more difficult for me to express to the viewers exactly where, when we kind of are tracking these storms, we can kind of narrow it down by highways and neighborhoods and specific streets. It does make it a little bit more difficult to do so within these types of storms because of these interactions with the little outflow boundaries as they continue. So we're going to be watching kind of this area around 1082 north of LA 21. So this is north of Abita, you know, kind of the near 1082, excuse me, can't see now. 1082 to LA 21, probably right within here. Again, the velocity is not really showing up, not what I think a lot of folks now are more attuned to seeing when we're talking about possible rotation within a storm, but it looks like it would be right at about in through here, and that would work with the timing that the Weather Service had mentioned in these storms kind of approaching maybe Covington toward Abita a little bit later in the hour. These are very slow moving within the thunderstorms themselves. And as we kind of zoom in here, so this is kind of around the Waldheim area in central St. Tammany Parish, where we may be looking at a possible tornado. I just want to go back and kind of read the text from what the Weather Service is saying. 919 severe thunderstorm capable of producing a tornado was located about 7 miles southeast of Abita. Okay, so they are saying southeast of Abita or 12 miles northwest of Slidell. What kind of threw me a little bit is what looked to be some rotations. They're saying near Abita, and then in their discussion that the dangerous storm will be around Abita at 9:55. But as I said, the text from the National Weather Service is saying it was located 7 miles already southeast of Abita Springs and moving west. Okay, so this is a storm moving west at 10 miles an hour. What it does make it a little bit more complicated is that when we typically show warnings within these structures of thunderstorms, most of the storms themselves are all kind of moving in the same direction. What we're looking at here is that that really isn't the case. Because these storms are the warnings, the potential tornadoes are all being triggered by this interaction with these outflow boundaries, which are moving in all different directions. So kind of depending upon where the outflow boundary is able to get that little spin up and where it may be pushing the possible tornado, is that they sometimes are moving in all different directions. So the one that we're watching, and again, we're kind of looking at the various colors of the winds that are moving away from the radar site. Again, that is in Slidell. So these are all moving away from the radar site. Nothing, while it doesn't necessarily jump out, let me go to the last 15 minutes here. Well, nothing really jumps out. You can kind of see the overall motion of the winds is to the west. I know you may be wondering at home thinking, what are you looking at? You kind of watch the yellows and the oranges, and they're all kind of moving to the west. So if there is an embedded tornado, that is the direction that it is moving, and moving very slowly. So there is time to watch this. Again, kind of near the Abita Springs area, then moving toward Covington, kind of a large area that is being highlighted by this potential tornado. I'm just looking at the velocities again to get a rough idea of where this tornado may be. If there's anything, I'm going to go switch over to the shear. Just, yeah, I mean, there's a little bit of wind shear right over Abita as of right now. So again, if you're in this area, you need to be taking shelter immediately, not trying to watch this from the window, get away from any window. Exterior walls, really in the entire warned area, in central St. Tammany Parish. You need to be in that centrally located room. Again, as far as who is being affected, this is generally north of I-12. So really the area that is being encompassed by this is north of 12. And then all the little communities that are, say, to the west of Abita Springs, maybe between LA 36 and 435. These are the areas that you want to be in that centrally located room while we wait for these storms to pass. Obviously, when we switch back over to the reflectivity, this is not something that you think, I'm going to see this coming and I'll have plenty of time to react. If there's a tornado in here, it is heavily embedded within some very intense rain and lightning. So the storms themselves are not allowing for you to just view outside what may be headed your way. So that's something you need to consider. A lot of folks think they'll be able to see it coming and respond accordingly. That really is not the case with some of these storms. So that's something that you need to be mindful of as we continue to track these storms, is that they are at times a kind of quick spin up of a possible tornado, and they are heavily embedded with some very, very intense rainfall. So kind of zooming back in here, getting a little bit more detail on some of the roadways that may be impacted. So Money Hill Golf Course and Country Clubs, folks kind of familiar with that area. This is kind of moving right over you at the moment. And you see almost how as we zoomed in on these, and I know sometimes all the roads make themselves a little bit more complicated to see, you had that outflow boundary from the storms that were just to the east, and then that kind of initialized more storms. You had additional thunderstorms coming in from the north, and that interaction is what kind of sparks a little bit of brief rotation within the storm, and that is what sometimes will prompt another warning to be issued. And so sometimes it does become a little bit more complicated with exactly where the warning may be. And as I said, within these type of storms where you've got the outflow boundaries embedded within some very intense rainfall, at times even our velocities are not jumping out as to exactly where that rotation may be. It appears as though it's more right centrally located just east of Abita Springs. So moving toward the west would take it toward Abita shortly, and then eventually toward Covington. So these are the areas that we're watching for very closely. A lot of little communities out here. You see all the neighborhoods and streets that are highlighted now on our map. A lot of these little areas have the possibility of a tornado passing over. And even if there isn't, you're going to find some very strong winds, very heavy rainfall, and as we switch back over, intense lightning. These storms are almost making visibilities near impossible within these storms. All right, and we've got a new severe thunderstorm warning, which was just issued a moment ago for northern Orleans and Jefferson of the outflow boundary. So that little outflow boundary that we were looking at a moment ago when I was mentioning the strong winds associated, it does look like now a severe thunderstorm warning has been issued for that. So that one will go, let me see, it's already getting reports of some near severe wind levels, so near 60 miles an hour. This storm is moving to the west, so for Jefferson Parish, Orleans Parish, it's moving west at 20 miles an hour. So at the moment, no tornado with the one on the south shore. Certainly a possibility if it starts interacting with some other little outflow boundaries, but at the moment it is just a severe thunderstorm warning. So folks in this area, your phone may have just gone off and you're wondering, what are you talking about? Well, the rain isn't there yet, but because of this little outflow, you've got 60-mile-per-hour winds that are now passing through the city. This could initiate another little thunderstorm, or if nothing else, you're right now getting some strong straight-line winds at 60 miles an hour. That's enough to do some, hopefully just minor damage. But as we kind of widen out, let's just look back at the last 30 minutes of this outflow boundary as it kind of passing through the city, I should say, is that it has associated with it some 60-mile-per-hour winds, and you're still well removed from the main thunderstorms. And notice, as these little outflow boundaries move, you start to see building of the thunderstorm. So that's why these thunderstorms will continue to build toward the west through the rest of the night and into the overnight period, continuing with this severe thunderstorm threat, and at times embedded within that some possible tornadoes. Again, they're not going to jump out at us. It's a little bit more difficult to track when we're trying to show viewers exactly where we may be looking at. There looks to be right around the Waldheim area a little, we call our rotation tracker. We're looking at wind shear. So it looks to be a little bit right near Waldheim, and then another area right near Abita Springs. Does become a little bit more difficult to show you with the velocities. That's when it's a little bit more clear cut. And as I said, I think most of our viewers are fairly attuned to exactly what we're looking for when we start kind of analyzing these storms. We've dealt with enough and shown enough of our severe weather products here on radar to where I think a lot of folks know what we're looking at. This situation is a little bit different, where we're not able to show you kind of some of those clear-cut signals of a potential tornado. But obviously in this area, Waldheim toward Abita Springs, and then eventually, if it holds together, toward Covington, you need to be watching for that. Regardless, you've got some strong winds, heavy rainfall. Let's even take a look at the potential of some hail within this storm. You're looking at, now these are estimates based on the algorithms of the radar, P to nickel, and even maybe isolated quarter-size hail. There have been reports with several of these thunderstorms of quarter-size hail, and that is a potential around the Abita Springs area and moving toward Covington. As far as the wind shear goes, what we call kind of our rotation tracker, nothing really jumping out. We can actually show a track of the rotation tracker, and you kind of watch for some of these little lines, or maybe there was some indications of that rotation to continue, and maybe kind of at the southern end of the warned area, we might have had a little track kind of following almost right along LA 36 toward Abita and then moving in the direction of Covington. No real tracks, but a little bit of a wind shear marker here around the Waldheim area. So a couple of areas that are certainly worth watching in our tornado warned area on the North Shore. And then the folks on the South Shore metro area may be getting that alert on their phone of the severe thunderstorm warning. You're probably wondering, it's not even raining here. Maybe I see the lightning and the flashing of the sky off in the distance, but there's no rain. Well, it's because of this little outflow boundary that is spreading across the city. Actually, kind of interesting that the Uptown, Riverbend area, downtown, not included in this, because obviously you do have that little outflow boundary moving there as well. I'd venture to say just about the entirety of the metro area would be under this risk of the strong straight line winds as they continue moving toward the west. 60 mile an hour is a rough estimate of what these winds are doing. That would be the criteria for a severe thunderstorm warning. That had been something we were showing you within these thunderstorms as they develop. You get the colder air aloft as that falls out of the storm. That cold air spreads away from the thunderstorm itself. As that cold air spreads, it lifts the warmer air out ahead of it, and at times that can then initiate another thunderstorm. Even if it doesn't, that strong, that cold air rushing away from the thunderstorm can sometimes move at 60 miles an hour, and that looks to be what is happening within these winds right over City Park, almost to, well, over the Uptown area, moving almost toward the Riverbend, and then we'll continue into JP through Metairie, Old Jefferson, eventually toward Kenner, River Ridge area as well with this strong wind. Difficult to say if we'll see any thunderstorms initiate from that outflow boundary, but certainly some gusty winds being felt over parts of the metro area right now. The little outflow boundaries that help to get those thunderstorms going on the North Shore in central St. Tammany Parish, that is where we still have our tornado warning, which will be in effect for a bit longer as that threat continues there. Again, as I had said, what is a little bit more difficult within these is that it doesn't necessarily have the textbook criteria for looking at the velocities where those kind of jump out at you as our viewers, as I said, are a little bit more accustomed to seeing these things. You kind of see what may not be jumping right out at you, which you sometimes have to just kind of time frame this in the past and maneuver it. What looks to be happened right at about here was that little rotation that started to get detected at around, what is that, 9:17, 9:18. And as we kind of put that into motion, you kind of follow where that went. It was generally to the south of Waldheim, but it looks like that little broad rotation, maybe just to the south of Abita, or in parts of Abita, but just to the south, and maybe about to move out of the warned area over Covington shortly. So this would probably stay more to the north of Madisonville. It's again all north of 12, but looks like it would stay north of Madisonville and maybe affect more of the Covington than maybe toward Goodby. If it keeps moving a little bit more north, maybe eventually toward Highway 190. So that looks to be where we are watching for that possible rotation, maybe just about out of the warned box shortly. We are not been looking back at our chat group to see if we're getting any reports of damage. Absolutely nothing. Let's see. A severe thunderstorm warning is about to come out for the Mandeville area, as it looks like we're going to start to see some strong winds there shortly, what is called the rear inflow jet. Technical within some of these thunderstorms, but looks like the possibility of some strong winds around the Mandeville area. So for Mandeville, we've got some strong winds there, so get ready for a severe thunderstorm warning to be issued for you. We will see if the Weather Service decides to continue this tornado warning or maybe extend it if they're still seeing that indication of possible rotation. I kind of zoom in here. It's right around, you see Robert Road, Strain Road, Harrison Avenue, and Abita Springs. It's kind of right in through here. There's Three Rivers. So it's moving in that direction toward Covington, the Abbey. So it looks like it could move in that direction, maybe staying south of the Abbey, then toward Goodby as that storm continues moving toward the west. If I keep looking at my watch, it's because I have this set up to get my alerts on my phone and on my watch. Plus I got the chat group going, so we've got various sources of information coming into the weather office, and there goes that new severe thunderstorm warning. That does include Mandeville. Now this is all for more or less possibly including the area that was under the tornado warning, because you'll notice that the new severe thunderstorm warning that has been issued includes that area that is moving toward Covington. So with the issuance of a severe thunderstorm warning, my guess is they will allow the tornado warning to expire, not reissue it as a tornado warning, but kind of continue this as a severe thunderstorm warning, and include, because of some of the stronger winds associated, will include now down toward the lakefront. So Mandeville, Madisonville, does include Covington. If this were to hold together, would be just kind of beyond that toward Goodby as well, moving in that general direction. So from I-12 north, well, actually I should say from the lakefront north, is now under the warned area for a severe thunderstorm. The main threat would be the strong gusty winds associated with that. Switching back over to the reflectivity, again, and putting this into motion, this is where the storm activity has been over the last hour and where it continues to propagate. What we've seen is with the interaction of these little outflow boundaries, you can kind of watch them here where they start to interact. You can kind of initiate some more thunderstorm activity, but also create wind shear, and thus create enough of a wind shear where you get a rotation to then spark a tornado. So that's what we have seen in various areas on the North Shore. The area that is still under the tornado warning has kind of been overlapped now with a severe thunderstorm warning. This does include down to the lakefront, as well as a little bit almost toward the Tangi parish line. So this includes kind of the rest of the area that will be affected in the short term by the severe thunderstorm. Again, for folks on the North Shore, the lightning has been intense. It does look like, as we kind of watch this, still the lightning has almost started to take more of a focus. If you kind of watch this over time, I'm going to step off here, you kind of watch what had been far more active in, say, the Mississippi Sound is now starting to shift with quite a bit more lightning. Well, not really shift, but almost starting to see the southern end of this weekend. The northern end on land is still fairly strong, moving through St. Tammany. And then again, this is just kind of a rough estimate based on our lightning, but that usually is a fairly good indicator of where thunderstorms may be weakening. Some of those thunderstorm tops may be starting to fall apart. And something that we don't show very often here, only because I don't know if folks, if it's useful or not, is that we can kind of take a scan of the of a storm and actually kind of get a rough idea of just how tall the storm is. So just kind of looking at this storm itself, we're going to kind of scan out and see just how tall the storm is. And as I tilt our camera down a little bit, Just kind of scanning out. Now these, these are going 20, almost 30,000 feet into the air. And then as let me erase that. Again, this is something I don't like doing all the time on air, because sometimes I don't know if folks at home, if it helps you or not. But what we saw from the storms that were out over the Biloxi Marsh, so I'm going to go back in time about 30 minutes or so, kind of get a rough idea of just how tall those storms were. I'm going to go back and do kind of actually I'm going to do a volume scan here so we can kind of get a better idea of what those storms are doing. You can kind of see where the peaks are at about 20,000 feet 30 minutes ago. Then as we kind of put that into motion, they peak at about 20. And then as we've gone into the future now, currently, that's more averaging, 10 to 15,000 feet up. So these storms that are over the Biloxi Marsh south of the Mississippi Sound have been weakening. So that is a trend of those storms weakening. However, the storms that we do have still over St. Tammany are not yet. So it's certainly not done, but maybe the models have been right. They've been indicating that these storms would then begin weakening over the next couple of hours, and hopefully that is a trend which continues. We don't see nearly the amount of lightning within the storms from Lake Bourne over the Biloxi Marsh and then outward south of the Chandeleurs. Still very healthy storms that are out over central St. Tammany Parish. And note, as I'd said, sometimes you're going to get lightning strikes that are removed from the thunderstorms. Look at the lightning that is well removed from the actual rainfall. Wouldn't be surprised to see an occasional lightning strike even in parts of the city with all that heavy rainfall still well off to the east of the metro area. New severe thunderstorm warning that includes Covington, Mandeville, Madisonville, and Goodby. This is mainly because of the strong winds that are moving to the west within these thunderstorms. We have a flood warning that is in effect for a good portion of St. Tammany Parish within this heavy rainfall. Does include, and notice, Picayune and parts of Hancock County are still under the flood warning. However, we're starting to see the heavier rainfall move. So the storms have been moving. This is not what we saw earlier in the day, where these storms just sat and kept building and building almost on top of each other, and it just kept propagating and not going anywhere. This is not going to be the same situation. Obviously, we get some decent downpours. You're going to see some low-lying areas, some of the drainage ditches that you have on the North Shore. Those are going to probably flood fairly quickly, especially as we start to see more drainage and the water starting to fill those areas. So certainly some standing water and a flooding risk, certainly, but not the risk that we saw with these storms that were much farther to the west of us. These storms at least are moving slowly, but they are moving, and that will continue through the rest of the night tonight. As I said, most of our area is under a severe thunderstorm watch until 1 a.m. Notice that the storms up in Washington Parish are not nearly as strong as they had been. We had almost these little individual cells kind of along this boundary, kind of firing up almost more southwestern Mississippi than firing up and moving into St. Tammany. We're not seeing quite as much of that activity. The storms themselves that have been more south of the coast have been weakening. The thunderstorms, though, that are over St. Tammany still very much active. A lot of lightning, heavy rainfall, strong winds, and that has been really the main threat within these storms, are those strong winds where you could easily get winds of 60 miles an hour sustained, and that can easily do some damage, regardless of the fact if you have a tornado with it. So that's kind of secondary to some of these warnings that we have seen issued. We are getting up at Pearl River Fire Station, the Pearl River Fire Station on Highway 3081, some pea-sized hail. They're also getting rainfall rates of about 3.5 inches an hour in Ozone Woods in Slidell. The rainfall total at Ozone Woods in Slidell is 1.62. So when I kind of gave a rough estimate about 1 to 2 inches of rainfall, that's pretty much spot on. You're getting rainfall rates in excess of about 3.5 inches per hour. Thankfully, though, these are not just sitting. So while there are intense rainfall rates, the storms themselves have been moving, and there at least is some motion to these storms as we continue throughout the rest of the night. So far, we've been dry in the city. The severe thunderstorm warning was because of the little outflow boundary and winds of 60 miles an hour, but thus far, we have not seen any of the rainfall in the metro area. Rainfall continues, though, very intense. Folsom, you're getting a lot of lightning. Most of the heavier rain is just to your south and east, and that's about the extent of our tornado warning. Yes, there still is a tornado warning in place. However, I'm going to zoom back into it. The area that we had really been watching closely, I'm going to switch over to our velocities, and again, it's not the signature that I think so many folks are very accustomed to seeing, is when we kind of put this into motion, you can watch as that warning was at first issued. This is that rotation that we were seeing, and then when we scan this out over the last half hour, you still see it showing up there, and then it's almost moved entirely out of the warned area. So I would say that at least inside the warning, the tornado warning itself, that threat is now gone. That threat has now moved into the area highlighted by the severe thunderstorm warning, and that more is for the Covington area, eventually Goodby, as that storm continues moving, or at least that part of the storm continues moving toward the west. I keep glancing at my phone, and we're getting all kinds of alerts here. New thunderstorm warning until 10:45. This is for basically the storms that are moving in now. This will include Orleans Parish, St. Tammany Parish, the storms that are here right now. And you can kind of see how that warned area looks, that it includes for St. Tammany and northeastern Orleans Parish. At the moment, not including kind of a crazy looking warned area right now. Does include Orleans Parish, not quite into Jefferson Parish. So this is a new warning on top of the warning you already have. I know this does get very confusing with warnings popping up left and right. Wish there was a better way to, as the threat level is remove the box and just make it a little bit cleaner, but it's not exactly how the computer systems work. So as this entire cluster continues moving down almost to the southwest, we'll start to see more and more warnings issued if the storms themselves hold together. Let's switch back over to our computer model and see if we've gotten some new data in on the latest run. Not quite yet. So notice the model itself, again, these high resolution models aren't perfect. We'll get a new run. I'm saying we should get a new run. I'm forgetting when I showed it to you. It was not in the last hour, so we're not going to have new data in here just yet. But as we kind of look at where the model thinks the storms are right now, again, not perfect. Most of the storms themselves have actually more into St. Tammany Parish and parts of Orleans Parish. So you can kind of move these storms maybe a little bit more to the west or west-southwest from where they are right now. And as we put that into motion, we could kind of see, additional development, but further weakening of most of these storms through the 10 to 11 o'clock time frame. May still have a few isolated areas firing up, but it looks like probably well before 1 o'clock, most of these storms should be gone. And that has been a trend we have seen with our lightning counter, looking at the intensity of some of the rainfall within these storms, that it does look like we have seen a general trend of these storms to weaken. That is great news. The storms that had been far more active south of the Mississippi Sound in the Biloxi Marsh, you'll just look at the last hour or so, how much those storms have weakened. We're starting to see kind of a propagation of additional development out to the west, and that is likely where we will continue to see the development of these thunderstorms. Still very much active now out over the northeastern part of the lake, so we'll be watching for this as that too starts to spread farther to the south and west. That is where some of our more intense lightning has been thus so far over the last say 25 minutes or so. We're getting videos in, and I can't look at all the videos at the moment, but a lot of videos coming in of the intensity of the lightning. Okay, we do have our Eleanor Tabone, who is just outside of our building on North Rampart in the French Quarter, just with what we're seeing here in the city. And as I said, Eleanor, we're getting ready to get on some of these intense storms. So what does it look like at the moment?
Well, Chris, like you just mentioned, we are out the front of the building on North Rampart Street. Now you can really start to feel that wind picking up. There's some moisture, what feels like in the air. We just felt some sprinkles a moment ago, but you can see the trees blowing, the flags across the street blowing in the wind here. That wind has definitely picked up since I was outside a few hours ago, but there have been no power outages reported across New Orleans so far as of yet. Now, neutral ground parking is allowed right now, so if there is any flash flash flooding, neutral ground parking is allowed. But like I mentioned, Chris, no rain so far. That, as you mentioned, the possible thunderstorms on the way. We are feeling some light sprinkles, but there's definitely some heavy wind picking up out here in the French Quarter, Chris.
All right, Eleanor, thank you so much. So we're kind of in preparation for some of these stronger storms to continue moving our way. I'm speaking about the metro area right now. We're already in on some of the heaviest of the thunderstorm activity on the North Shore, really more focused now. St. Tammany Parish, we're starting to see far more of a break in Washington Parish. And as I was showing you just a moment ago, the computer model, it is not perfect. The models are far from perfect, especially with some of these kind of rapidly developing type systems. The models just are not that good, they're not. So really all we can do is almost a near-term forecast, kind of watch in real time over the last hour or two to kind of get a rough idea of what these storms are going to do. Thankfully, the main threat have been gusty winds. Now, with that said, 60-mile-per-hour winds can do sometimes just as much damage as a very weak tornado in sometimes a larger area. So that's going to be the main threat over the course of the next several hours. If there is any positive, is that it does look like at least the structure of the storm itself is beginning to wane a little bit, and some parts of the storms are starting to weaken as well.
Chris, I'm just jumping out here because I've been monitoring what's happening online, just seeing if anyone has any videos or pictures. Of course, you can always send it to WWL-TV, to our social media pages, so that if you see any, if you see any rain or lightning in your way, send us those videos. Chris, I had a viewer that just sent me a message, had a quick question about the storms that we're seeing right now.
Yes.
They're wondering if this is connected to the dangerous heat levels that we've seen, the excessive heat levels that we're seeing in our area.
Somewhat. You do get some added instability because of the heat, but this is actually kind of a complex of storms that you could almost trace back to what has been moving up and around the upper high. This is actually going back to last week, a pattern which has been consistent. For the most part, the storms have been focused to our east, which is where we've seen the rounds of heavy rainfall in parts of the Florida beaches, Alabama, and they kind of get round after round. We're starting to see the structure, that upper high, weaken a bit, and now it is allowing for some of these storms to start moving our way. And even once we're done with these storms tonight, there is a chance for more storms as we head into the day tomorrow, if nothing else. Now, there is a risk of some severe weather within those storms, but if nothing else, with the rainfall expected tomorrow, it should help to, one, maybe keep some of our temperatures out of the mid-90s, and two, even if we're able to get into the low mid-90s, kind of help to regulate those temperatures somewhat. So there is some connection with the extreme heat that we've been seeing, the more instability in the atmosphere because of that heat, but really more than anything, it's just been a complex of storms that have been generally to our east that are now starting to favor more over southeast Louisiana. And as we've said in our 7-day forecast, we're starting to see a change in our pattern with daily rain chances finally beginning to return to our forecast. So not every day will we see severe weather or something like this, but now our rain chances are starting to return to the region.
All right, Chris, they have some people that are saying that they're worried. They say that in some houses, I haven't checked the numbers recently, but the power outages are being reported in places like Slidell. They were asking, is Covington out of the tornado danger, or is that warning still there? And some of our viewers are asking now, is there any change in rotation detection? They were just concerned about exactly where that warning stands right now.
The warning is still in place, but as we were analyzing it a moment ago, it looks like the threat has actually moved out of that warned area. And in fact, the fact that the National Weather Service issued a severe thunderstorm warning a little bit ago, now we're talking about the central St. Tammany Parish, the fact that the Weather Service kind of overlapped the tornado warning with a severe thunderstorm warning led me to believe that maybe they were no longer really seeing that rotation any longer, at least not well defined to warrant a new or extension of the tornado warning. So that leads me to believe that the main threat is not necessarily from rotation, but just from the strong straight line wind. So I would say, just as we've been analyzing that storm on the North Shore, and I know it does get complicated with so many of these little warned and these warnings and boxes kind of crisscrossing all over the place. The real threat for any tornadoes still within the warned area is gone now for St. Tammany Parish. Really now it's more the strong winds that are pushing outside, in fact, of the tornado warned area, and moving and continuing into the new severe thunderstorm warning. I know this does get confusing. Folks are already confused enough with the difference between watch and warning, and when they're overlapping with each other and boxes all over the place. I know that may not be the easiest to decipher, but long answer is it does look like that threat is over, but still certainly some very strong winds moving through the Covington area, eventually moving toward Madisonville. If they're not getting into the strong winds now, then Beatico, and then that could continue into Tangipahoa Parish shortly.
All right, Chris, thank you so much.
Okay.
Again, I'm looking for some pictures and some videos here. If any of you happen to be in the middle of this and you're in a safe location, you can always text us pictures or any videos you have. That number is 504-529-4444, and that's in that area, and as well as sending it to our email address as well. So we have Chris Franklin that's standing by, and Chris, you've been doing this for some time now, and mostly the new questions that we're hearing from a lot of people and the comments that we're hearing from a lot of people, especially the ones that I'm speaking to right now on our Facebook Live, is that they're seeing a lot of rain and lightning in Slidell, and someone actually told me they're seeing bits of hail that's coming down in Slidell right now.
Yes, there have been some reports of small hail within the thunderstorms. Generally speaking, they're kind of P to dime size, so smaller hail. We do have a new flash flood warning for St. Tammany and in Tangi until 1 a.m. Thankfully, again, we're not getting too many reports so far of any excessively high rainfall totals. And as I said, the rain is moving, but the flash flood warning only because the rainfall rates, in other words, the rate at which the rain is falling, rainfall rate, have been in excess of 3.5 to almost 5 inches of rain per hour. That's exceedingly high. And so within a very short period of time, you are going to get some street flooding. You're going to see a lot of the ditches and exposed areas, low-lying areas on the North Shore. Those can quickly start to fill up from rain and then drainage. So in those areas, you probably already have some standing water, and that could be exacerbated over the short term because of the high rainfall rate. So new flash flood warning has been issued for the North Shore. It's at St. Tammany Parish at the moment until 1 a.m. We do have some video of the lightning that we had seen a moment ago in Slidell. Again, we were looking at our tower camera looking back towards some of these storms out over, more Lake Bourne, but this is just that we call kind of a strobing effect of the lightning from Slidell. It has just been almost non-stop within these thunderstorms. And a lot of what you're seeing is it's called cloud-to-cloud lightning. So it's actually lightning that's staying within the cloud itself, not necessarily actually reaching the ground. And that's what sometimes causes more of that strobe effect, that you don't actually see the lightning bolts themselves. These are embedded within the cloud itself. But you also see the heavy rainfall that is coming down. Again, thankfully, I've been monitoring our chat. I'm hoping our newsroom has been kind of hawking the scanners. I've not had any reports, thankfully, of any real damage, minor damage perhaps, but nothing significant across the North Shore or in Mississippi, where these storms had originated a little bit ago. As we kind of watch on, I'm going to widen out the radar just to show you the storms themselves. As we've kind of watched those storms that have been moving in from Washington Parish, they really have fallen apart over the last hour, and not nearly as intense as they continue kind of getting fed into this main complex of storms. So the storm does look like it is starting to weaken a bit. Now again, that does not mean we are done with this or that it's only going to last for another half hour. So that is not the case at all, but just kind of widening out, you can clearly see over the last hour these storms have been weakening. So they will still pose a bit of a threat as they move over the metro area and continue across the North Shore, but it does look like maybe the models will verify and that these storms will continue to wind down over the course of the next couple of hours or so, and hopefully by about 1 a.m. when our watch has expired, we should see all of the rainfall cleared of the area. Sharice?
WWL-TV's Eyewitness News begins with breaking news.
All right, thanks for joining us, everyone. I'm Sharice Gibson. We've been talking about it for the last hour, rather. Severe weather that is coming through our area, mostly affecting St. Tammany Parish right now. So far, we haven't heard of any damage. We haven't seen any pictures or videos of things that may be damaging. But for right now, if you have any pictures, any videos, you can send them to us, 504-529-4444. Chris Franklin has been following this. Chris, I've been looking at this online, just trying to speak to our viewers to ask any questions that they may have here. So far, people are just saying right now in Slidell, they're seeing hail, they're seeing a lot of lightning, and they're seing a lot of rain. But you said that the rainfall hasn't been significant enough, but there was a flash flood warning issued recently.
Yes, there is a flash flood warning that is in effect for St. Tammany Parish. And again, this is mainly for the rainfall rates that we have seen, not necessarily the accumulations thus far. But reading exactly what the Weather Service is saying, the rain across the area, the rate is about 2 to 4 inches per hour, and rainfall accumulations have been at about 1 to 2 plus, and we could see another 1 to 2 inches of rainfall through the course of the night. So that sometimes can quickly start adding up, and while those totals are not excessively high for southeast Louisiana, when you get that much in a short period of time, you are going to see some flooding. So this is more of a cautionary warning that has been issued for the North Shore. Some of the totals that we have seen so far: Ozone Woods and Slidell, 1.69 inches of rainfall. So, you know, the totals, again, you're going to find some much, much higher and some much, much lower across St. Tammany Parish. Thankfully, as I said, the rain is moving. We have not seen these storms just sit like we did when they were over southern Alabama or even parts of Jackson County, Mississippi. They are moving, and they will continue to do so. Just watching our radar trend over the last hour, these storms had started in more Hancock and Harrison, or Harrison and Hancock, and now pushing into St. Tammany Parish, are starting to move more into the almost central part of Lake Pontchartrain, still inching their way through eastern New Orleans, and will continue into the metro area. Little outflow boundary that had prompted that earlier severe thunderstorm warning has now almost cleared Jefferson Parish. So the stronger winds are now, depending upon the speed of those winds, have now almost exited into St. Charles Parish. And we're still seeing some of that building of the storms westward, but even the lightning that we had offshore south of the Mississippi Sound has really started to weaken. Not, I won't say fallen apart, because it's still fairly predominant with the lightning, but not nearly the lightning strikes that we were getting earlier. Still some intense rainfall, and sometimes the lightning is almost makes what I'm trying to show you a little bit more complicated. So I'm going to remove the lightning just to show you the intensity of the rainfall, and you are going to find some pretty intense rain that is nearing the causeway at the moment, spreading across the eastern part of Lake Pontchartrain through New Orleans east, and we're now starting to see some of that kind of building of the rainfall into parts of the metro area. Again, this is going to be ongoing over the next couple of hours. Hopefully the severe threat will be limited, but something that we'll be watching throughout the course of the night. Sharice.
All right, Chris, thank you so much. Of course, be watching it throughout the night. We'll check back in with you in a second. We're giving you a live look right now. This is on a twin span. Obviously, that traffic is slowing down, and some people using their emergency blinkers right now because some rain is going through that area. And those flashes that you're seeing there, that's not just the lights that you're seeing from the car. Those are flashes of lightning. A lot of you have been sending us messages. If you go to our WWL-TV Facebook page, sending us messages showing that lightning show that's been going on for really more than an hour here in the rain that's coming down. I saw that some of you are still taking pictures, but there is a warning for everyone to just stay indoors, to try to stay away from what they're seeing right now from all of this lightning, because we would hate for something tragic to happen. So far, we have not heard of any significant damage. We have not heard of anything. That is rather alarming. We did see the St. Tammany Parish Sheriff's Office say that there could possibly be some trees down, which obviously with the winds and the rains, that's not too bad to be expected. Let's take a look at what's happening in Slidell right now. If we can take a look at that video, there it is. This is what we're talking about here, video that we received to our newsroom of the rain that is outside, and it is consistently coming down along with the lightning. It seems like that just continues to roll. Now, of course, they have some power outages in that area. We'll find out in just a second where those are, but I just want to mention that NOLA Ready just sent a message to me saying that due to thunderstorms in the area, winds have been observed at 65 miles per hour. Strong winds and even stronger gusts are possible over the next hour. Of course, they were allowing for you to do neutral ground parking if you like. And if we do have those storms move in our area, they're not necessarily here just yet, but we can see the lightning from that area. Now, if we can get my producer to pull up the CLECO map, we are at more than probably 200 outages, 250 outages, excuse me, when it comes to the power outages in that area, which is, obviously you think that you would get more, but this is rather low when you have such a significant storm. We're hoping that it doesn't grow and progress, but 250 outages that are in that area. That's due to the CLECO outage map. So right now, we're keeping our eye on severe thunderstorm warning that is moving through the area, a flash flood warning that's moving through the area, and of course, some of you in New Orleans are concerned about the storm since you've gotten that message to know already. Of course, you can always download the WWL-TV app. That app will give you all of the latest alerts. You saw Chris, he's been live here doing a fantastic job for the last hour or so, covering this from the very beginning when it was a tornado warning. Now he's saying it's winding down. Chris, I don't want to tell a tale here. We are winding down when it comes to this, right?
The storms themselves, yes, the entire line is starting to weaken. Still will be active as it moves through St. Tammany and then eventually into the metro area. But yes, the storms have been weakening, and that is a trend which will continue through the night.
All right, so we don't think that this is going to pick up at all. They said that this is going to weaken. So, of course, make sure you send those pictures and those videos to our website, WWL-TV.com. And be sure to download the download the WWL-TV app. You can follow along with Chris with any updates. If there's anything that we need to let you guys know in regards to emergencies connected to the storm, that'll come directly to your phone. Go to your app store. You can download that app for free. So we're going to check back in with Chris in just a second. But for right now, the LSU Tigers, unfortunately, tonight lost at the College World Series in a thriller. The Tigers are still alive, but they'll now have a long road to get to the National Championship Series. Sports Director Doug Mouton joining me now in studio with more. Tough loss.
Yeah, look, I got to say, Sharice, it was an incredibly entertaining ball game tonight, decided partially by a play at the plate that really could have gone either way. And now to get to the National Championship Series, LSU will have to win 3 times over the next 3 days, beginning tomorrow night in Omaha against Tennessee. Now, this is the play at the plate. It was 2-2 in the 8th. Trey Morgan on third. Cade Beloso will ground the ball to third. Then the double clutch at third makes it closer at the plate. Wake Forest catcher Bennett Lee, who transferred to Wake this offseason from Tulane, makes an incredible play at the plate. Morgan's hand on the plate, and the tag literally happened less than a second apart. And then at the bottom of the 8th, it's Bennett Lee from Tulane to Wake, the hero of the game. He gets the game-winning single. Wake Forest wins 3-2. Brooke Kirchhofer has reaction now live in Omaha.
Yeah, Doug, it was one of those great college baseball games that you only see right here in the College World Series in Omaha. You could feel the anxiety building all the way up into the press box when Wake Forest knotted it up in the bottom of the 6th. And what a situation for Thatcher Hurd to come in. His very first College World Series experience, a really tough outing for him, but he minimized the damage. And then, of course, as you mentioned, Doug, the Tulane transfer catcher Bennett Lee drove in the winning run for Wake Forest in the bottom of the 8th, and LSU had even recruited him, so that's just the talent. Lee is a really tough loss for LSU tonight.
Great college baseball game. Hats off to the pitching on both sides. They got a clutch hit there at the end, and we did not. Get ready to go tomorrow.
Yeah, they were mixing pitches really well, going in and out. Executing their plan. We were also trying our best to execute our plan. I feel like we put a lot of pressure on them, and we needed to. It just didn't work out for us in the end.
Yeah, and we will detail Morgan being out at the plate. That would have tied it at least with Bennett Lee later driving in the 3rd run. It would have tied it 3-3. We will detail that later on in sports, but for now, live in Omaha, Brooke Kirchhofer, Eyewitness News. Doug, back to you.
Yeah, terrific job, Brooke, and we will see you again a little bit later in sports. Sharice.
Doug, thank you so much. Well, today was Juneteenth and marks the day the last of the enslaved found out they were free. Now, for many, it's a day to eat some good food and hear some good music and probably dance. And for others, it's a chance to learn more about their past. Eleanor Tabone spoke with one woman at a Juneteenth celebration today who found a piece of her family nearby.
Juneteenth honours the end of slavery in the United States, and for one New Orleans resident and small business owner, today is significantly important for her and her family.
I am a natural holistic healer. My great-grandmother, who is Marie Alfred, was a healer on the plantation at Whitney Plantation.
Leodia Day's great-grandmother was enslaved on the Whitney Plantation in Wallace, Louisiana, where she worked as a cook and a healer.
Standing in the kitchen of my great-grandmother, Marie Alfred, who cooked here over a century ago.
Leodia says her great-grandfather helped build the church on the plantation.
So I'm all through Whitney.
Which is why she felt it important to visit the land her ancestors once worked while enslaved. Their plantation now acts as a museum, sharing the story from the perspective of the formerly enslaved.
Created and built by 50 black Native men, one of which my grandma called Papa.
She wanted to have a spiritual connection to the place her ancestors once lived, sharing her journey on TikTok.
I felt empowered. I felt free. I felt like I was her hope, her dream for what she wanted for her daughter.
Now practicing holistic therapies herself, she says her great-grandmother was her inspiration.
That's my biggest dream. I made her proud.
Juneteenth is a day she says we should all embrace to ensure equality for all.
We are our ancestors' dream. We are their hope. And so we need to pass that same thing down to our kids and our grandkids.
Eleanor Tabone, Eyewitness News.
The celebration was definitely had by all today. All right, we're going to take a quick break. When we come back, Chris, we'll have another look at the weather. So, of course, make sure you stay tuned with us and download that WWL-TV app. We'll be right back. St. Tammany Parish President just tweeted. He said, no. The St. Tammany Parish President just tweeted. They say they have a few reports of trees down, including on Albert Street in Mandeville, and a home was struck by lightning in Lacombe. Once it is safe, we will confirm. Stay home. I'm gonna make a tag board. Yeah. You can reference that tweet and then talk to it. Right. I don't know if you want to try to call his folks again to see if, since he's tweeting, see if we can get him on the phone. I'll do that with my brother. Thank you. We need to update some of the numbers, because I called the number of one of the St. Tammany numbers, and the guy was like, I retired 7 years ago. It's an All right, welcome back. Right now, we're continuing to follow some severe weather that's passing through neighboring parishes and actually making its way to the metro area. We're going to check in with Eleanor Tabone in a second. She's in our newsroom, in front of our newsroom, rather, where she said some rain is coming down pretty hard or making its way to this area. I just want to mention here the St. Tammany Parish President, Mike Cooper. He did just send out a tweet saying that they did receive some reports, including on Albert Street and Mandeville, of some trees that are down and a home that was reportedly struck by lightning in Lacombe. They said once it is safe, they will confirm these reports. But right now, these are just some of the things that they're hearing so far. So we'll check back in with you in a second with hopefully the parish president, if we can get him on the phone, to try to see what's going on in that area. But for right now, let's jump into the front of our station. That's where Eleanor Tabone is. And obviously, Eleanor, a big difference from what it was a couple of minutes ago when you were out there.
That's right, Sharice. A severe thunderstorm warning issued across the city. Now, since I've been out here before 10 o'clock, we got out here around 9:30, the weather has changed dramatically. We're seeing a lot of bolts of lightning out here. Now, it started to drizzle. That rain got much heavier. It faded away, and now came back, and now we're seeing the rain has kind of held off for a moment, but you can definitely still feel in the air that rain is coming. It's getting windier and windier. As you can see, the lightning is now striking across the sky. But as I mentioned before, the rain has come and gone over the last hour, but it definitely feels like more rain is heading our way, Sharice.
All right, Eleanor, make sure you're careful out there. They did say that rain was coming this way. I want to just mention to you all that NOLA Ready does say that you can park on the neutral ground. But I want to go to Chris Franklin, our chief meteorologist here. Chris, do we think that the neutral ground parking for Orleans Parish or the metro area is necessary at this point?
It might be. You know, err on the side of caution. We've got some heavy rainfall that'll be moving through fairly quickly into the metro area. We know it doesn't take much to cause the street flooding. So, yeah, I would say err on the side of caution. If the trends continue, then I think we will be in okay shape. But hey, if you can and need to park on the neutral ground, I would go ahead and do so. Rainfall continues. We can kind of follow this line from almost Amite through central Tangi and now almost more central and southern St. Tammany. So things settling down in northern St. Tammany, much quieter up in Washington. Same in Pearl River County, and almost the entirety of Hancock County is starting to see some clearing. Very intense lightning, strong winds, heavy rainfall in southern St. Tammany, over Slidell, the Twin Span, boy, just being not horrible rainfall rates, but certainly heavy downpours. The lightning really has been the most impressive with these storms. Metro area, as Eleanor just said, you start to get some kind of light to moderate rainfall pushing through. The bulk of that is still off to the east. And what's interesting is we kind of watch the trend here of those storms. They're not really moving necessarily west. They're almost had moved south, and we'll see if these are able to even hold together. We might start to see those weakening and could avoid some of the heaviest rainfall in the city. And then down toward the coast, it's been more spotty showers, kind of that little leading edge moving to the west. You started to get that flare up of some showers and thunderstorms, but not nearly the intensity of what we did have offshore. These storms have been slowly progressing since early this evening. Again, most of the day today, we've been under sunny skies, and it wasn't until late that we start to get these storms building off to the east. The models did an okay job with at least indicating that we would see these storms building westward. Not exactly how they would be aligned, but certainly indicating that we would see these storms kind of progressing toward the west. And we're not done with the rainfall. We will have another level 2 threat for severe storms tomorrow, as it looks like another complex of storms will start working their way in during the afternoon and evening. Models kind of keep going back and forth as to exactly how much rain coverage, but certainly have been indicating more rain during the day tomorrow. And if we get it early enough, then it could at least prevent us from getting into the mid-90s, or if nothing else, even if we do get there, kind of help to regulate our temperatures. Flood watch will remain in effect through tomorrow evening, as we could see, again, with the anticipated rain tomorrow, 3 to 6+ inches of rainfall. Also want to update you on what's going on in the tropics. We have Tropical Storm Brett. This, again, is not an immediate concern at all. It is still 1,200+ miles away from the southern Windward Islands, so basically 1,200 miles away from even getting toward the Caribbean. On the Colorized satellite loop you don't really see so far. We'll see what happens through the overnight. We're not really watching those blossoming thunderstorms develop around the center. But boy, when you watch the circulation, very impressive looking, and you got that decent outflow. We also have some strong storms associated with Invest 93 being given a higher % chance of developing in the next several days, but still neither poses a threat to us. What we're looking at, this is a new track, no dramatic changes, but we are expecting, in fact, look at this, Hurricane Center actually has it strengthening through the next few days and then weakening as it moves into actually toward the Caribbean and then weakening further into the Caribbean. The reason for that is that the wind shear expected over the Caribbean by this weekend is expected to be high. That is hostile for further tropical development. So the Euro, which had been the one indicating more of a motion into the Caribbean, had the storm falling apart. The GFS, which had been trending more north of the Caribbean, kind of maintained some of the structure, but it looks like we'll see if maybe the GFS is starting to come in line with the Euro in thinking. This is a look at the pressure centers, and basically through Thursday, the models are in decent agreement. Now after Thursday, let's see what happens. The Euro continues west and weakens. The GFS kind of keeps the storm maybe in the extreme northeastern corner of the Caribbean before starting to make a little bit of a turn. And notice this is 93, which could become our next named storm. Models have been consistent in indicating that it's going to stay out over the open Atlantic. So as of right now, none of the tropical systems pose a threat to us. Our immediate concern is going to be the rainfall. And again, we could see some rounds of heavy storms during the day tomorrow, a high of around 91. Then we are finally back into more of a normal summer pattern with at least our daily rain chances and highs lower to at times some mid-90s.
Yeah, I gave up on that a long time ago. Yes, how are you? Straight from the Via Live. No reason to pop me back up. Huh? Oh, okay. You can kill that last VO. Hey, am I on the web talking like that? Oh, nice. LSU will now have to fight its way back from the elimination side of the bracket. The Tigers will have to win 3 straight over 3 days to get to the championship series. Wake Forest now just needs to win 1 to get there. The Tigers will play Tennessee in an elimination game tomorrow night at 6. LSU has not been great without Paul Skeens, and tonight they started with Ty Floyd, and for 5 innings, Floyd was brilliant. 10 strikeouts over 5, 0 runs allowed by LSU over those 5 innings, and the Tigers got some offense in the third. Man on for Tommy White. White rips the RBI single. Josh Pearson scores, 1-0 Tigers, and then LSU will get a break on the next batter with White on second. Trey Morgan with the liner to left. It really should have been caught, but instead it goes for a shadow-aided RBI triple. White scores easily. LSU had a 2-0 lead. White and Morgan had 2 hits each, but LSU only had 5 hits as a team. Floyd walked the bases loaded in the 6th and was pulled. Then Thatcher Hurd gives up the RBI single. Wake Forest got 2 in the 6th to tie it at 2. Then the play of the game, top 8, Morgan on third, Cade Beloso grounds to third. The play at the plate, Morgan is tagged out by Bennett Lee, who transferred to Wake Forest this offseason from Tulane. It was extremely close. Could have gone either way, ruled out and then confirmed. And then in the bottom of the 8th, it's Bennett Lee delivering what turned out to be the game-winning RBI single. That put the Demon Deacons up 3-2. LSU got nothing going in the 9th. Camden Manasseh shut the door for Wake. LSU falls 3-2. Brooke Kirchhofer now live in Omaha with post-game reaction. Brooke.
Hey, Doug, I want to take you through that Cade Beloso at-bat where Trey Morgan tried to steal home and after review was ruled out. In that situation for LSU, it was tied 2-2 in the top of the 8th. And we talked to Trey Morgan in postgame, and he told us that he was given the red signal, which means he goes on contact no matter what. The only problem, Beloso hit into third base and allowed Wake Forest to make a play at home plate and get the out. Jay Johnson even said in postgame that Beloso has not done that all year. LSU falls 3-2, and after the loss, Johnson details what happened in the flow of the game.
It really came down to Wilkin hit a ball up the middle with no outs and got the guy in from third, and then he made a heck of a play on that play, and then they got a RBI hit there in the 8th, and we didn't when we had our one chance right there.
That's what makes postseason baseball so exciting and stuff, that a lot of people's backs are against the wall and stuff, but I know we've been here. No, this postseason we haven't been here, but I know we're going to come out hot tomorrow and stuff, and I know that we're going to do our plan tomorrow. We're going to execute all we can.
LSU will face Tennessee tomorrow, so no breaks for the Tigers. And Jay Johnson says they expect to face Tennessee arm Drew Bean, who has 9 wins and 4 losses at Tennessee. We'll see if the LSU bats can handle him tomorrow night. For now, live in Omaha, Brooke Kirchhoff, Eyewitness Sports. Doug, back to you.
Yeah, thanks, Brooke. It's a tough road for LSU now. Sharice.
All right, Doug, thank you so much. We want to go right now out to New Orleans East. We have one of our photographers that's parked out there, and obviously he's getting a show. Take a look. The lightning has been going consistently. Actually, when I was driving back towards the station this evening, one of the first things I noticed before we even saw a drop of rain, we've been getting a lightning show and rolling lightning. And not necessarily thunder, but just rolling lightning here for the past several hours. And if that's any indication of just how bad that lightning is out there today. So, of course, be careful as you're out. We'll be right back with more news. All right, welcome back to that live video that we showed you just a couple of minutes ago. Lightning right now in New Orleans East. Chris just telling me that that's usually contained in the clouds, and that rolling lightning has been going on for several hours now. We also have some more video from hail. This video is from Kill, Mississippi, and it looks like some maybe pea-sized hail here. I'm not, obviously don't know all the terminology, but some pea-sized hail here, so not some very big pieces. But you have that severe system that went through that area,
Yes.
that is going through
The North Shore, starting to move into New Orleans East, or continuing to move into New Orleans East right now. That's pretty big.
Right.
When he was able to kind of give us an idea of just how big it is. Rainfall will continue through probably next